What is left of 24 hours ago
Everybody was coming out, cooking out in their front yard.
is a reminder of what is lost.
Everything just went downhill from there.
In the Eastland neighborhood of Fort Worth at Castleman and Comanche, 39-year-old makeup artist and business owner was killed in the crossfire.
It hurt.
Her cousin, Pastor Felton Jenkins.
It's a different kind of pain.
July 4th, 2024, Fort Worth, Texas. A woman named Latasha Hyman points her phone at a crowded block party. She's smiling, laughing with friends, capturing the holiday fun on Facebook Live.
I had your back. You doubted me. You thought I was going to shoot that. You really did. That's right. Check it out. Check out the ball.
Fireworks pop in the background. Music plays. Everything seems perfect. Then, in less than 3 seconds, her smile disappears forever. What you're about to hear will stay with you long after this video ends. This isn't just another true crime story. This is about how one woman's final moments were broadcast live to the world, and how a community celebration turned into a nightmare that shocked America. Because what happened next on that Facebook live stream would expose the dark truth about gun violence in America. And what about the arrest that came 2 weeks later? It only raised more questions than answers. The clock was ticking and nobody knew it. This is the story of Latasha Hyman. Welcome to our channel. Before we get started, like this video, share and subscribe to this channel to help raise awareness and spread caution. Let's begin. This is Latasha Hyman. At 39 years old, she was living her best life. She owned a successful makeup business called Slay by Shay, with over 1,000 loyal clients in Fort Worth. People loved her work, but more than that, they loved her energy. She had this way of making everyone around her feel special. Latasha wasn't just a businesswoman. She was engaged to Tommy Howard, a man who had lost his previous fiancée to cancer 4 years earlier. Tommy said Latasha saved him from his grief. She brought light back into his world. To her family, especially her cousin, Pastor Felton Jenkins, she was pure joy. Every time they met, it was hugs, kisses, smiles, and dancing. On July 4th, 2024, Latasha and Tommy decided to attend a block party on Castleman Street in Fort Worth. It was near Tommy's parents' house, and the whole neighborhood was celebrating Independence Day. Between 200 and 300 people filled the streets. Kids were running around, adults were grilling food, fireworks were going off. It was the kind of community celebration that brings people together. But here's what makes this case different from other murders you've heard about. Latasha was streaming everything live on Facebook. Her phone was recording when the celebration started. It was still recording when everything went wrong. In 2024, we live our lives online, sharing our happiest moments with the world. But sometimes, social media captures more than we bargained for. What started as a fun holiday video became evidence in a murder case. Police would later find over 100 shell casings at the scene. Not from one gun, not from two guns. Multiple shooters had opened fire into a crowd of hundreds of innocent people. 2 weeks after that terrible night, police arrested 21-year-old Toderick Rogers on murder charges. But investigators believe he wasn't alone. They're still looking for other shooters. The case is far from over. Latasha Lachey Hyman was born on October 3, 1984, right here in Fort Worth, Texas. From childhood, she had this gift for lighting up every room she walked into. Friends and family say she never met a stranger. She could talk to anyone and make them feel like they'd known her for years. But Latasha wasn't just friendly, she was smart. Really smart. While other people talked about starting their own business someday, Latasha actually did it. She created Slay by Shay, a makeup and beauty service that became one of the most popular in Fort Worth. The name says it all. She helped people slay, meaning she made them look and feel absolutely amazing. Here's what's incredible about her business success. In a city the size of Fort Worth, with hundreds of makeup artists and beauty professionals, Latasha had built a client base of over 1,000 people. Think about that for a second. That's not just customers who came once or twice. These were loyal clients who trusted her with their most important moments: weddings, graduations, job interviews, date nights. When people in Fort Worth wanted to look their best, they called Latasha. Her clients weren't just paying for makeup, they were paying for the Latasha experience. She made people feel beautiful inside and out. She had this way of boosting confidence that went way beyond just applying foundation and lipstick. When you left Slay by Shay, you walked taller, you smiled bigger. That was Latasha's real gift. But business success was only part of her story. The most important chapter began when she met Tommy Howard. Tommy's life had been shattered 4 years earlier when his fiancée died from cancer. He was broken, lost, struggling to find any reason to keep going. Depression had taken over his world. Then Latasha walked into his life. Tommy later said that Latasha literally saved him. Not in some dramatic movie way, but in the quiet, daily way that real love works. She helped him process his grief. She showed him it was okay to be happy again. She proved that losing someone you love doesn't mean you can't love again. She was my savior, Tommy said after her death. Those aren't words people use lightly. When someone saves you from the darkest period of your life, they become more than just a partner. They become your lifeline. Latasha didn't just heal Tommy's heart, she expanded it. She brought him into her world of family, friends, and community connections. She showed him what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself.
Sweet, she's my angel. Every time we see each other, it's a hug, it's a kiss, it's a smile, it's a small dance, you name it. We gonna treat each other up. She was loved by everybody. She was loved by everybody.
Her cousin, Pastor Felton Jenkins, knew Latasha better than almost anyone. As a pastor, he'd seen a lot of people in his life. But he said Latasha was special, even among the good people he knew. Every single time they saw each other, it was the same routine. A big hug, a kiss on the cheek, huge smiles, and usually some dancing. She is sweet. She is my angel, Pastor Jenkins said. Notice he said is, not was. Even after her death, he couldn't bring himself to talk about her in past tense. That's how alive her memory remained. Pastor Jenkins spends his days fighting against gun violence in Fort Worth. He's seen what bullets do to families and communities. But when violence took his own cousin, the pain hit different. This wasn't just another statistic or another case to work on. This was his angel, his family, his heart. The thing about Latasha was that she made everyone feel like family. Her 1,000 clients weren't just business relationships, many of them considered her a friend. When news of her death spread, it wasn't just her blood relatives who mourned. It was hairdressers and teachers and nurses and students and grandmothers, all the people whose lives she had touched through her work. She had this rare combination of professional success and personal warmth. In a world where people often have to choose between being good at business or being good to people, Latasha proved you could be both. She built a thriving company while never losing her humanity. That's what made July 4th so cruel. Latasha was at the peak of her life. Her business was booming. Her relationship with Tommy was strong and heading toward marriage. She was surrounded by family and friends who adored her. She had everything to live for. She was 39 years old, which means she probably had 40 or 50 more years ahead of her. 40 more years of making people beautiful. 40 more years of loving Tommy. 40 more years of dancing with Pastor Jenkins. Instead, she got 39 years, and it all ended in 3 seconds on a Facebook live stream. July 4th, 2024, started like any other Independence Day in America. Families were planning barbecues, kids were excited about fireworks, people were getting ready to celebrate freedom and community. For Latasha and Tommy, it was supposed to be a simple evening near his parents' house on Castleman Street. The block party had been building all day. By evening, the entire neighborhood had transformed into one big celebration. Castleman Street was packed with people from wall to wall. Families had set up grills on the sidewalks. The smell of barbecue filled the air. Kids were running between the adults, playing games and waiting for darkness. so the real fireworks could begin. Music was pumping from multiple speakers. Different groups had their own setups, creating this mix of hip-hop, R&B, and classic party songs that blended together into the soundtrack of summer. People were dancing in the street. This wasn't some random party that got out of hand. This was a community tradition. Neighbors who might only wave at each other during the rest of the year were sharing food and stories. It was the kind of gathering that makes you remember why you love where you live. Latasha was in her element. She loved being around people, and this was people everywhere. She had her phone out, capturing moments for her social media. Tommy was by her side, probably still amazed that he had found happiness again after losing his first fiancée. They were just another couple enjoying the holiday. But as the evening went on, things started to shift. The crowd kept growing. What started as maybe 100 people had swollen to somewhere between 200 and 300. The street was getting more crowded, the music was getting louder, the energy was getting more intense. Some people in the crowd started getting creative with the fireworks. Instead of just shooting them up into the sky, they began aiming them toward houses. Residents who weren't part of the party started getting annoyed. Windows were getting hit. People were yelling at each other to be more careful. Then the cars showed up. Young drivers started treating the intersection of Castleman and Comanche streets like their personal racetrack. They were doing donuts, spinning their cars in tight circles, tires screaming, smoke pouring from the rubber. The crowd was cheering them on. But this wasn't just harmless fun anymore. Tommy Howard later said this was when he started feeling uncomfortable. The donuts weren't just showing off. They were aggressive, dangerous. The drivers were revving their engines, getting closer to the crowd, taking bigger risks. What had been celebration was turning into something else. But Latasha was still having fun. She had her phone up, recording everything for Facebook Live. To her, this was just part of the party atmosphere. The donuts were exciting. The crowd was hyped. She was documenting what felt like an epic 4th of July celebration. If you watch the Facebook Live video, and police have it as evidence, you can see Latasha's face in those final moments. She's smiling, she's laughing, she's talking to people around her. The phone is shaking a little because she's moving with the music. Behind her, you can see the crowd, the cars, the chaos of a big street party. She has no idea what's about to happen. The reckless driving was creating tension. Some people in the crowd were getting angry about the cars getting too close. Others were encouraging the drivers to do more dangerous stunts. Arguments were starting to break out. Voices were getting raised. But in a crowd of 200 to 300 people, individual arguments can get lost in the noise. Most people, including Latasha, probably didn't even notice the growing anger. They were focused on their own conversations, their own fun, their own little corner of the party. This is how violence often starts at large gatherings. It's not usually one big explosion. It's a series of small tensions that build up. The fireworks aimed at houses, the dangerous driving, the arguments between strangers, the alcohol, the heat. The crowd getting bigger and more packed together. Pause for a moment and tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed something like this in your city? What state are you watching from? Because what happened next in Fort Worth could happen anywhere in America where people gather to celebrate. Latasha kept recording. The Facebook live stream was still going. She was still smiling, still talking, still enjoying what she thought was just a really good party. The timestamp on the video shows it's getting later in the evening. The sky is getting darker, the fireworks are getting ready to start, and then in the span of about 3 seconds, everything changed. Forever. The first gunshot rang out, then another, then another. Within moments, it wasn't just one gun firing. It was multiple guns from multiple directions, creating a sound like a war zone in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Latasha's smile disappeared. The phone kept recording, but now it was capturing screams instead of laughter. People were running in every direction. The celebration had become a massacre. And it was all happening live on Facebook, streaming in real time to anyone who was watching Latasha's feed. The technology that was supposed to help her share joy with the world instead broadcast her final moments to strangers on the internet. The party was over. The nightmare had begun. When the first shot fired, most people didn't immediately understand what was happening. In a crowd with fireworks going off, that first pop could have been anything. Maybe a car backfiring, maybe a really loud firecracker. For a split second, the party almost continued. Then came the second shot, and the third, and suddenly everyone knew this wasn't fireworks. What happened next was pure terror. Multiple gunmen opened fire into the crowd of innocent people. This wasn't a single shooter with one weapon. Police would later count over 100 shell casings scattered across the scene, over 100 bullets fired from several different types of guns. Think about that number for a moment. Over 100 rounds. That's not someone losing their temper and firing a few shots. That's sustained gunfire lasting several minutes. That's multiple people with multiple weapons all shooting at the same time. The Facebook live stream captured the exact moment when celebration turned to horror. 1 second, Latasha is smiling and talking to friends. The next second, her expression changes completely. You can hear the panic in her voice as she realizes what's happening, but the phone keeps recording. Even as chaos erupts around her, the live stream continues. People are screaming, running, falling. The camera shakes as Latasha tries to move, tries to find safety, tries to understand what's happening to her community. Latasha was hit twice. The first bullet struck her in the chest. The second hit her arm. According to the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office, these weren't random shots that happened to find her in the crowd. In a scene with over 100 bullets flying, she was directly targeted by the violence. She wasn't the only victim. Marcus Martin Jr., just 19 years old, was also killed that night. Marcus was from San Diego, probably visiting Fort Worth for the holiday. He was shot in the back, which means he was likely trying to run away when the bullet found him. A teenager from California, celebrating Independence Day in Texas, cut down before his life really began. 2 other people were also shot but survived their injuries. They were rushed to local hospitals where doctors worked to save their lives. In a crowd of 200 to 300 people, it's actually amazing that only 4 people were hit. But when you're firing over 100 rounds into a packed street, the fact that anyone survived is almost a miracle. The scene was absolute chaos. Hundreds of people were running in every direction trying to find safety. Parents were grabbing their children. Couples were separated in the panic. Elderly people who couldn't run fast were being helped by strangers. Cars were speeding away, tires squealing as drivers tried to escape the gunfire. Some people took cover behind parked cars. Others ran into nearby houses, pounding on doors and begging to be let inside. The lucky ones who lived on Castleman Street were opening their homes to strangers, pulling people inside to safety. The shooting seemed to go on forever, but it probably lasted less than 5 minutes. When you're in that situation, time moves differently. Every second feels like an hour. Every bullet sounds like it's aimed directly at you. Emergency dispatchers were flooded with 911 calls. People were screaming into their phones, trying to give locations, trying to describe what was happening. But in the chaos, it was hard to give clear information. All anyone knew was that multiple people were shooting into a crowd on Castleman Street. The first police officers arrived to find a war zone. Shell casings were everywhere, over 100 of them scattered across the street and sidewalks. Different caliber bullets, meaning different types of guns. Blood on the pavement. Abandoned shoes and purses and phones where people had dropped them while running. Latasha was found near where she had been streaming. Her phone was still there, still recording, though by then it was just capturing the aftermath. Tommy was somewhere in the chaos, probably trying to get to her, probably not understanding yet that the woman who had saved his life was now dying on the street. Marcus Martin Jr. was found in a different location, suggesting he had tried to run before being shot in the back. At 19, he had his whole life ahead of him, college, career, maybe a family someday. Instead, he became another statistic in America's gun violence epidemic. Paramedics worked frantically to save both victims, but their injuries were too severe. 2 lives ended on a street that should have been filled with celebration, not carnage. As police secured the scene and investigators began their work, a horrible truth emerged. This wasn't even the only deadly shooting in Fort Worth that night. Latasha and Marcus were 2 of 5 people killed in separate shootings across the city on July 4, 2024. Just hours after the Castleman Street massacre, another tragedy struck. 4-year-old Ivy Pierce and her 1-year-old sister, Winter Houston, were killed in a shooting outside the Crystal Clean Car Wash on West Cleburne Road. A man had gotten into an argument and decided to settle it with a rifle, firing into a group that included 2 babies. 5 people dead in one city on one night. A 39-year-old businesswoman, a 19-year-old visitor, a 4-year-old little girl, a 1-year-old baby, and one more victim whose story we may never fully know. Fort Worth had experienced one of the most violent Independence Days in its history. What should have been a celebration of American freedom became a reminder of how quickly freedom can be taken away by people with guns and anger. The Facebook live stream finally ended, but the horror was just beginning. When Fort Worth police arrived at Castleman Street, they faced one of the most complex crime scenes in the city's recent history. This wasn't a simple murder case with 1 victim and 1 shooter. This was a mass shooting with multiple victims, multiple suspects, and evidence scattered across several city blocks. The first challenge was securing the area. With over 200 people fleeing in panic, the crime scene had been contaminated within minutes. Witnesses were scattered across the neighborhood. Some had driven away before police arrived. Others were hiding in nearby houses, too traumatized to come out and talk. Detective teams began the painstaking work of evidence collection. What they found painted a picture of extreme violence. Over 100 shell casings were scattered across the street, sidewalks, and yards. But here's what made the investigation even more complicated. These weren't all from the same gun. The casings came from several different types of weapons, different calibers, different manufacturers, different firing patterns. This meant multiple shooters had been involved, each with their own weapon, each firing multiple rounds into the crowd. Investigators also found live rounds that hadn't been fired. In the chaos, some shooters had dropped ammunition or their weapons had jammed. Every piece of evidence had to be photographed, cataloged, and sent for forensic analysis. The ballistics work alone would take weeks. Each casing had to be examined to determine what type of gun fired it. Each bullet recovered from the scene or from victims' bodies had to be matched to specific weapons. The goal was to figure out exactly how many shooters were involved and what role each one played. Meanwhile, detectives were trying to interview witnesses, but getting people to talk wasn't easy. Some witnesses were afraid of retaliation if they cooperated with police. Others were so traumatized they couldn't remember details clearly. Many had been drinking at the party, which affected their ability to give accurate statements. The Facebook Live video became crucial evidence. While it was horrific to watch, it provided investigators with a real-time record of exactly what happened. They could see the crowd, identify potential suspects, and establish a timeline of events. For 2 weeks, the investigation continued with no arrests. Police were following leads, analyzing evidence, and building their case. They knew they were looking for multiple suspects, but identifying them from a crowd of 200 to 300 people wasn't simple. Then, on July 18, 2024, exactly 2 weeks after the shooting, Fort Worth police made their first arrest. Toderick Rogers, 21 years old, was taken into custody and charged with murder. Rogers' arrest was a breakthrough, but it also raised new questions. Police haven't revealed exactly what evidence led them to Rogers or what role they believe he played in the shooting. Was he one of the main shooters? Was he involved in planning the attack? Did he fire the bullets that killed Latasha and Marcus? What investigators have made clear is that Rogers wasn't acting alone. They still believe multiple shooters were responsible for the gunfire that night. This means Rogers' arrest, while important, is just the beginning of the justice process. The challenge now is identifying and arresting the other suspects. In a case with over 100 shell casings from different weapons, There are clearly other people who need to be held accountable, but finding them requires witnesses to come forward, forensic evidence to be processed, and investigators to piece together exactly who did what. Community cooperation remains a major challenge. Some residents want justice for Latasha and Marcus, but others are afraid to get involved. In neighborhoods where gun violence is common, talking to police can put your own safety at risk. The investigation continues today. Rogers sits in jail awaiting trial, but the full truth about what happened on Castleman Street is still emerging. Justice for Latasha Hyman and Marcus Martin Jr. is still incomplete. More arrests may be coming. The question is whether the community will help police find the other shooters, or whether some of them will escape accountability for their role in this tragedy. When someone you love dies suddenly, the world doesn't stop. Bills still need to be paid, businesses still need to run. Life keeps moving forward even when your heart has stopped completely. Tommy Howard learned this the hard way. The man who had called Latasha his savior was now facing life without her. Remember, Tommy had already lost one fiancée to cancer 4 years earlier. He knew what grief felt like. But losing Latasha was different. Cancer gives you time to prepare, time to say goodbye. Gun violence gives you nothing. Now Tommy had to figure out how to live without his savior. How do you rebuild your life twice? How do you trust that happiness won't be stolen from you again? These are questions no one should have to answer, but gun violence forces people to face them every day. The business impact was immediate and heartbreaking. Within days of Latasha's death, a sign appeared on the Slay by Shay social media accounts. It is with a heavy heart that we announce the passing of our beloved owner Latasha. The business is temporarily closed, but everyone knew temporarily really meant forever. You can't replace someone like Latasha. Her 1,000 clients weren't just paying for makeup services, they were paying for her personality, her energy, her ability to make them feel beautiful. When she died, Slay by Shay died with her. Think about what that means economically. A successful business, built over years of hard work, gone in 3 seconds, jobs lost, income streams ended, dreams destroyed. Gun violence doesn't just kill people, it kills futures, opportunities, and economic stability. Pastor Felton Jenkins, Latasha's cousin, was devastated in a way that went beyond family grief. As a pastor who fights against gun violence in Fort Worth, he had seen this tragedy strike other families. Now it was his own family bleeding. The Latasha Hyman case forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the world we live in today. Her death wasn't just a random tragedy. It was the result of several larger problems that affect communities across America. The Facebook live stream raises difficult questions. Should social media companies do more to prevent violent content from being broadcast? How do we balance free speech with public safety? What happens to families when their loved ones' final moments are preserved forever on the internet? But the bigger issue is America's gun violence epidemic. The statistics are shocking, and they disproportionately affect Black communities like the one where Latasha lived. Black Americans face gun homicide rates that are 13 times higher than white Americans. This isn't because of individual choices, it's because of systemic inequalities that have left some communities with fewer resources and more violence. Latasha's death fits into this larger pattern. She lived in a neighborhood where gun violence was common enough that a 16-year-old witness told reporters, "You grow up with it, you kind of get used to it." When teenagers think gunshots are normal, we have failed as a society. So what can be done? What do you think really happened here? Do you believe there's hope for preventing tragedies like this? Let me know your thoughts below, because solving gun violence is going to require all of us working together. The solutions exist. The question is whether we have the will to implement them before more people like Latasha Hyman lose their lives to senseless violence. Latasha's story reminds us that behind every statistic is a real person with dreams, relationships, and contributions to make. When we lose people like her to violence, we all lose. We lose their businesses, their creativity, their ability to make the world a little bit better. The pink and purple balloons released at her wake have long since disappeared into the sky. But the memory of what she represented, success, love, community, hope, should stay with us. Not as something we've lost, but as something we need to protect for others. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe that people like Latasha deserve better, then subscribe and hit the bell. Because the only way we're going to solve America's gun violence problem is by refusing to accept it as normal.